It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join News Director Paul David and News Editor Philip Catafamo as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics in Yavapai County that affect all our lives. And now here's today's Countywide.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Countywide. I'm your host, Philip Catafamo. I'd like to thank you for joining me. On today's show, we're talking current conditions on the Coconino National Forest, and my guest today is Forest Deputy Fire Staff Officer Jeremy Heumann. Mr. Heumann, welcome on to the show.
Good morning.
Well, we're happy to have you. There's been a few changes in our weather recently. Obviously, last night we had a bit of a storm up in the high country and a little bit of rain down here in the Verde Valley. So let's start out with this. What are the current conditions on the Coconino National Forest?
Yeah, absolutely. So, really, that's a deep question. There's quite a few things to cover in that, but certainly coming out of no monsoon last year. You're seeing lots of headlines, driest year in 20 years, 2020 was. Certainly that's true. It's carried on. The big snowstorm we got earlier, this, late winter, early spring, that snowfall really helped us a bunch as far as mitigating conditions. So right now, a lot of our larger fuels, the larger logs, things like that on the ground are about average. But generally, overall, the forest is drier than normal, certainly for this time of year, well below average on our snowpack and precipitation. But obviously, any little storm we get at this point into the spring, any little spring moisture we get, just kind of prolongs fire season, gives the forest just a little extra shot of moisture that will benefit us in the long run.
Very much so. You talk about the storm. Obviously, we had a huge storm earlier last month in February, and now we're here in the early parts of March, and it seems like we found ourselves another early storm. As I mentioned at the top of the show, we had one last night, kind of bled a little bit into this morning. So how important have the February and March storms been for the forest?
Well, the February storm was huge, right? If you remember going back to last fall, we were into fire restrictions into mid to late November. Very unprecedented for this area. And that simply was the fact that we just did not receive any moisture. We were well below average in the monsoon. And so that February, things were looking very bleak. We would have seen very early restrictions, things like that, up until that time when we got that snow in February. So this storm last night, we saw anywhere from an inch to just a couple inches of snow up here in the high country. Favorable, but certainly not a game changer by any means. Even the storm in February, it just prolonged. It helped, but we were so deficit at that point. It wasn't a cure-all for sure.
Yeah, and I believe that cure-all would have been 2 or 3 storms like that, correct? Like ones we had seen in February, had we had at least a week or two of some very heavy precipitation, would that have significantly impacted the forest conditions? Had we had a few back-to-back storms like that?
Yeah, that certainly would have got us back to average and probably above average in some areas. That's what it would have took. We haven't seen that. If you remember that storm in February, it followed up. We got that snow and then we got some rain. It kind of warmed up right after that, and a bunch of the snow melted fairly quick. And then it got really cold. And so I think that was a little bit of a saving grace in the sense that, the snow's kind of lingered, certainly in the higher elevations, the north slopes, places that tend to hold snow still have, in places, quite a bit of snow from that first storm, and then that little shot of moisture we got last night just added to it. So really any little shot of moisture at this point between now and June is just a bonus for us.
I believe you alluded to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say it won't end up making any huge changes. So
I believe you alluded to it a little bit, but obviously if we hadn't had this, the most recent moisture or even the moisture in February, how long would it have taken before fire restrictions would have been put in place?
Great question. So we were kind of starting to wonder if we ever were going to come out of them, right? So You know, these communities are well aware of how we manage that, but it's very science based. We look at indices as those indices are ERCs, energy release component. If those trend up, then which they were in the like I said, late November, early December, we were still seeing summertime type indices, which is why restrictions lasted. So we would have seen, I don't know, to answer your question, March, maybe April. It's hard to say, but certainly it would have caused a much earlier. We were busy with fires up and through December. So.
Yeah, and with that fire trouble in December, and obviously with had we not gotten that moisture in February, or even the moisture that we had just recently here in March, would those restrictions have been more significant, or more restrictive, because that duration of precipitation would have been even longer had we not gotten the precipitation?
Yeah, it wouldn't have changed the severity. What you would have seen probably sooner was we would have advanced through the different stages of fire restrictions quicker, and area closures, things like that we really try to avoid. Kind of last measure for us. We realize the impact of closures on the public businesses, our communities, on us as well. It's a huge impact to the surrounding area. You would have seen things like that come into play a lot sooner.
Okay. Have you been able to get a lot of prescribed burning done over the winter? And what else would you guys like to get done before we get to those warmer months?
Yeah. So obviously last fall, with the forest conditions, we didn't do much or any really prescribed burning. It was just too dry. The forest wasn't set up for success in that sense. We wouldn't have saw the ecological benefits that we prefer. So we were busy supporting the nation with fires, as well as having fires here locally. Not a lot of prescribed burning. We have, since the moisture, taken advantage of the snowfall, got some of the big, large machine piles from Fry and things like that. The larger projects here, the forest restoration projects, we've gotten a lot of piles burnt. The guys and gals on the ground have done that. And so that's been our main focus the last couple of months. Maybe a window for some spring broadcast burning. If you look to the southwest early this week, you saw some smoke. The Prescott was doing a prescribed burn,
right.
Put some smoke into the atmosphere. So,
and it's good to get those prescribed burns and those broadcast burns done. I would assume during the colder months, because obviously you've got the precipitation, or at least in a usual year, you would have that precipitation to get those. To get all those burnings done. But we've still got a lot more to talk about the Coconino National Forest with Coconino National Forest Deputy Fire Staff Officer Jeremy Heumann. We will talk a little bit when we come back on the other side of this break. We will talk about how the forest is gearing up for those spring and summer months. Stay with us. Countywide will be right back.
Who doesn't dream of home improvements? Perhaps your kitchen, the real living room. Maybe the bathroom, where you bookend your day. Langstrand Contracting is your one-stop shop from tear down to finishing touches. With 35 years of experience, Chris and his team will work with you to match your family's style and budget. Call Langstrand Contracting today for guidance in bringing your vision to life.
Award-winning Soundbites Grill is an entertainment restaurant located in Uptown Sedona at the Hyatt Pinion Point Resort. Open for lunch and dinner, featuring fresh fish, all-natural hand-cut beef, even a full vegan menu. Family-friendly, open 11:30 to 9, late dining on Friday and Saturday. Soundbites Grill has some of the best views of the Sedona Red Rocks. Offers world-class entertainment, food, fun, and music.
Hi, this is Greg at Verde Solar Power. You know, Arizona has lots of clean, renewable sunshine, and we want to help you take advantage of it with our quality solar installations, and we offer to beat any written offer on a residential solar electric system. So bring us your electric bill and let us show you how solar power will save you money. We're located conveniently here in the Verde Valley and are dedicated to helping the valley go solar. So remember, the energy solution comes up every morning.
Starting in the late 1920s, Grandpa Gettle and his brothers laid the groundwork for what would become a family legacy. Almost 100 years and 100 patents later, Gettle's High Desert Mechanical continues to raise the bar of quality heating, cooling, and plumbing products and services in the Verde Valley.
Call Gettle's High Desert Mechanical Heating, Air Conditioning, and Plumbing at 567-2200 or online at GettlesHDM.com, providing solutions for your comfort. Don't settle, get Gettles.
Welcome back to Countywide. I'm your host, Philip Catafamo. On today's show, we are talking about the Coconino National Forest, and my guest today is Coconino National Forest Deputy Fire Staff Officer Jeremy Heumann. In the first segment, we talked about the storms and how they've impacted conditions on the forest. The short answer is it's still very dry, so please be very careful with fire if you are recreating on any of our beautiful forests here in northern Arizona. Jeremy, we talked a little bit about prescribed burns and broadcast burns. You guys were able to get a few of those done while we had some more favorable precipitation on the forest. You talked about some of the operations that are coming up. I do want to ask, at the end of this the segment before we headed into break, I kind of alluded a little bit more to the conditions that you guys look for when you want to start one of those burns. So what are you guys specifically looking at in terms of conditions to where you go, okay, this would be a good day to get this pile burned?
Okay. Yeah. So great question. Obviously, piles, we're looking for, snow or significant moisture on the ground to avoid creep. It's a really concentrated amount of heat. So each prescribed burn has a specific prescription for that area. And so it's really not about a specific time of year, a certain amount of moisture. The ecosystem's adapted to fire, right? And so depending on the ecosystem we're working in, we really look for specific conditions within that ecosystem that's going to give us the best ecological benefits. And that's what we do year round.
And that's the point of the prescribed burns and the broadcast burns, not to linger too much on this topic, but those are the kind of the points of those burns, is to help with the overall health of the forest, getting rid of some of those more I'm losing track of the word, but trees and brush and shrub that are more they'll catch fire a little easier. I believe that is the reason why you guys do those burns, correct? Yeah,
exactly, to improve forest health.
Okay. Now moving on here, obviously COVID-19 is still going on. We did see some visitor restrictions during the pandemic. Spring and summer months, I would assume, are one of the bigger times in terms of visitors for the Coconino National Forest. Obviously, right now we're still a little cold, so not everybody wants to come up here. So how is the forest gearing up? Are you guys ready to take on that influx of people? From a fire perspective, are you guys ready for more people on the forest?
Certainly. So we prepare year-round, right? And really, you hear more and more of the term fire year. We still have kind of a peak season where we see fire activity. But yesterday we had 4 fires here on the forest, one from a couple of abandoned campfires, a couple of unknown causes at this point. But, even here right after moisture, we're seeing human-caused fires, fairly regularly. So as far as COVID goes, our responders are prepared. We're not going to shift significantly as an agency. You'll still see our fire personnel wearing masks when they're just out patrolling, not on the fire line. Social distancing is still going to be a huge thing on the national forest lands, even with the vaccine becoming more readily available, and some of our responders, receiving that. So it's not mandated that our responders have to get it. It's still a personal choice. Many of our folks have taken advantage of the availability of that, but really it's going to be masks, social distancing, limiting group size. Last year we talked about the module of 1 quite a bit, trying to keep our modules together and singular as much as possible. Obviously, when we get on a fire line, that's a little more difficult to do. Our priority changes to suppressing the fire. But those are some of the mitigations we've put in place to protect our personnel and the public.
Any additional law enforcement going to be brought on to sort of monitor those campsites and monitor the forest a little bit more?
So if we go into, not really my realm of expertise, but if we went into restrictions or area closures, something with the conditions of the forest, I would expect that we're going to go into some stage of restrictions this year. That's to be expected. Typically, when we're in different stages, we'll bring on extra patrols, law enforcement, just to help with enforcement and patrols related to those fire restrictions or area closures.
Kind of going back here to visitation, last year, obviously, with the pandemic going on, did the forest see an increase in visitation last year during that very heavy COVID year?
Oh yeah, absolutely, right. It was being encouraged heavily, get outside. That was the answer in a lot of ways. And then just a lot of beautiful places to visit, a lot of good hiking trails, and I think recreation as a whole was up. I don't have a percentage, but it was significantly more than what we see.
And I know that there are obviously the positives of all that visitation. People going to the forest, people enjoying the outdoors. You guys like it when there are visitors there, obviously. But there are obviously some takeaways from having a lot of visitation there, which is abandoned campfires. Obviously, abandoned campfires were a huge problem last year. They're a problem every single year, regardless if there's a pandemic or not. It is very important to always put out your campfires completely before you leave your campsite. Are they still an issue on the forest? How has visitation been this year as well? And have abandoned campfires been increased or decreased?
So I would say visitation's kind of static. It's definitely been above average. Even through the winter, we didn't really see it drop. With road closures and things like that, maybe we focus it to a particular area a little more. Related to abandoned campfires, the spring, especially going into the spring, early summer, we still have very cold nights. People don't see any immediate smoke coming off their fire. They think that, there's no threat there. But the spring's very breezy. And so what I would encourage folks, absolutely follow good fire, the prevention techniques that are taught to put your fire out. So you got to stir it. You got to use some water. Make sure it's completely cold before you leave. Yes, we have a problem with abandoned campfires. We patrol heavily for that. We have our known spots that are kind of trouble spots that we patrol. But like I said yesterday, couple of fires here on the forest, both caused by abandoned campfires.
Obviously, yes, with people recreating on the forest, definitely please make sure that your fires are dead and out, and douse them with water and stir them. Just make sure that they're out. We have, obviously, you just heard Mr. Human talk about it, that we have a problem still with abandoned campfires. Quickly here, before we head into our next break, has the forest begun hiring people for the wildfire season? And if not, when is that going to start?
Yeah, so our hiring's complete. We do that in December and January and late fall. So folks haven't started yet. Those crews will be coming on in April. But we have our permanent workforce that's on and like I said, ready to respond currently.
Fantastic. We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will talk about forest road closures and continue our conversation with Coconino National Forest Deputy Fire Staff Officer Jeremy Human. Stay with us. Countywide, we'll be right back.
Two things we can count on every year:
a new set of tax rules and great weather here in northern Arizona.
Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, locally owned and operated by Lewis Rice since 1997, is here for you all year long.
Your neighborhood Jackson Hewitt Tax Office will help you in all of your taxing situations.
Electronic filing is always free with your tax preparation at Jackson Hewitt Tax Service.
Get more in return. Call 1-800-234-1040 for an office near you.
The EPA says C&B Construction ranks in the top 1% nationally. C&B Construction invites you to see what energy efficiency and indoor air quality can be. We have won another Department of Energy Innovation Award, and C&B Construction is the only contractor in the country to win 6 consecutive EPA Indoor Air Plus awards. Experience our zero-energy, move-in-ready homes at Crossroads at Mingus.
C&B Construction, locally respected, nationally recognized. Find out more at C&B Homes.com.
Been hearing about the crazy benefits of CBD? Find out how CBD can help you at Sedona's #1 resource, CBD Sedona. Come in for a free consultation and let our trained medical staff help you find the perfect product for you. Pain relieving salves, full spectrum oils, CBD skincare, bath bombs, and even CBD for your pets. Come on by CBD Sedona today.
Terrifying jobs, high-flying linemen, take 3.
Josh, this is an absolutely terrifying job. Why do you do it?
It's a very demanding job, but very rewarding and exciting.
How much energy are you actually working with up there?
500,000 volts of electricity.
It's definitely not my line of work. Does anything shock you?
Yeah, distracted drivers terrify me.
Welcome back to Countywide. I'm your host, Philip Catafamo. On today's show, we are talking with Coconino National Forest Deputy Fire Staff Officer Jeremy Heumann. We've talked about a lot. In the first segment, we talked about the storms that we've had. Second segment, we talked about the preparation for increased visitation on the forest during spring and summer. And here we are once again speaking about wildfires. Obviously, wildfires are always an issue every year in Arizona and, of course, on our forests with abandoned campfires. Jeremy, drones apparently have become an issue during wildfire season. Can you remind us of the dangers of flying a drone over a wildfire?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, certainly an increase with problems with that. So really, the danger for us is for our aerial firefighters. Drones are super small. They're very focused on their mission where they're dropping. We want to be able to apply retardant and/or helicopter water drops as quickly as possible. And so, you know, the risk of a midair type collision with the drone could be catastrophic for our aerial firefighters. We're trying to, quickly apply that. And so when we have a drone intrusion and we can't immediately identify the safety, our best practice is to set everybody down. So we will cease air operations if we have, restricted drones in a restricted airspace until we're able to make that airspace safe for our aerial firefighting force.
Have you guys tried the pellet gun solution, which is somebody shooting a pellet gun at the drone to take it out of the sky?
I think you know how I'm going to answer that. Absolutely.
Jeremy, before we head out, is there anything else that people need to know about the upcoming spring and summer seasons on the forest? Anything coming up? Anything just that you feel is important before we head out?
Sure. Going into spring, absolutely, like we talked about in the first segment, well below average on our moisture. I think that's pretty apparent to most folks. We've had fires throughout the winter. Just don't get complacent. A little bit of moisture on the ground, a little bit of snow. Consider the variable conditions of the spring. We're expected to kind of have a really up and down weather pattern with the transition with La Nina. So we're going to have a very breezy spring. Windy days lead to large fires. Regardless of how many resources you're able to get on scene, wind is a great adversary for us. And I just really caution folks, if you're burning around your private property, you're out in the forest, you're having an abandoned campfire, please just really look at not only the day you're doing those types of activities, but what are the next few days going to look like? Like we talked about, abandoned campfires continue to be an issue. Please make sure you're stirring, you're drowning, you're putting your fires completely out, and do the best we can to protect our responders. With that, expect a drier. Definitely the higher elevations. We're expecting a busier fire season, right? Drought really affects your timber fuel types. We didn't get a lot of rain down in the desert. So as far as annual growth and the grasses, we were very active in our lower elevations last year. We expect average activity down there. We expect above average activity in the higher elevations.
Coconino National Forest Deputy Fire Staff Officer Jeremy Heumann. Sir, thank you very much for coming on the show, and we look forward to speaking with you again.
It was great being here. Thank you.
Of course. That is going to do it for today's episode of Countywide. I'm your host, Philip Catafamo, reminding you to please be careful while you're recreating out on the forests. And as always, have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.